together, and people would introduce us. Well, Roy's been around, certain line with Peggy would do a great introduction, and I'd look over at Patty and I'd remind everybody, I think she was there in 1921 when the very first Miss America was out, and of course she denied it, but it was probably just a few years later,
just
right?
a couple.
Yeah. There's so many things that we can talk about in this great program. And I text a number of you just recently because we learned that a real legend in our program nationally, Bob Arnhem, had passed away. For over 40 years, he was the executive director of California, but he was bigger than just a state director. He was absolutely a legend. He contributed so much to the overall program. And I could never recap his famous story, but one of his legends. By the way, he was in San Diego. He lived in San Diego. A very accomplished individual in his early days. His company built and created television, radio stations all over the world, Saudi Arabia, Tokyo, etc. And he retired from that many years ago, and has anonymously and secretly been a philanthropist ever since. Not just for the Miss America program, but sharing with Mike. It was all anonymously, and I only found out through a fellow law enforcement friend in San Diego that happened to be on one of the boards for the police foundation there, that he insisted on it be anonymous, but he leaked it out that, oh my God, he was so generous with the San Diego Police Foundation, Boy Scouts, boy and girl clubs, and those are the things that my friend knew about. And he heard that there were no doubt many more things that Bob was quietly and secretly involved in. But one of the things that we were so always blown away every year back in Atlantic City, and sometime for mid-year meetings in January. We used to be in the Sun Belt almost every mid-January in the old days. We called it a mid-year meeting, but it was compared to September, because all of us got together. The reigning Miss America was typically there. A 3-day meeting, workshops and everything, and Mike and Peggy and Patty and the gang were there, and it was really a joyous time when we weren't in Atlantic City with the competition and that fever going on, to just talk about the program and ways to improve it. Anyway, Bob, there's no way I can recap it, but I'll tell you two fairly short things. His inspirational talk, he bridged off of the classic story Brigadoon. And if you've ever aware of the original book or more popular Brigadoon, the movie, it starred Gene Kelly and Sid Charisse as a dancer, and it's a musical. But and Van Heflin and a couple of other stars that you would recognize. A 4-star movie, a brilliant one back in the 50s or 60s. But it's called Brigadoon, and it keys off of the old Irish story where once in 100 years there's a magic day where an Irish town comes alive. Nothing exists in this valley until this magic day. And Gene Kelly and his partner are visiting from New York City, and they're quail hunting, and they find themselves in this glen on that very day every 100 years when this Brigadoon community comes alive. And there's joyity and happy. It only lasts for 24 hours, and then everything fades away for another 100 years. Well, Bob used that as the key off of it, because we're so lucky, he would always say. We have our Brigadoon every year for at least a week, and we call it Pageant Week, when all of us are back there on the boardwalk in Atlantic City, and it was like a Disneyland and a festival that absolutely unbelievable in the days of yore. And he recapped it that that's the magic that we all feel being part of the Miss America program. Back there on the boardwalk, the trade show, the preliminary nights, the parties. If you've been involved in the program any length at all, and back in Atlantic City or Las Vegas, wherever it is, you really start to realize you got friends in every state in the union. You got people you know, and I remember people even mentioning many years ago, gosh, I'm going to end up in Ohio and on a conference or something. Oh yeah, Bob and Larry and blah, 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 they're going to have a couple of extra days. That's the great union that comes from being involved in a national program like this. So, okay, the magic that Bob by the way, by the time he finished this, people were crying. I mean, it was that moving and emotional for those who have heard it. And what a guy. We really miss him. And so I will just finish off with an event that I had with Bob. And many years ago, we were judging in the same state together. And I found out that he was on the board of police foundations in California. And that's my career field. So when the day was over on one of the preliminary days of judging, I pulled out one of my business cards. And at that time, I was chief of detectives, Seattle Police Department. And Bob, by the way, quite a wit, quite a sense of humor. So in the room the night before, I said, I'm going to give this to Bob tomorrow. And I'm going to write a little thing on it. And it was, I addressed it to the officer that may stop Bob Arnhem someday. And I said, and I had to write small to get this on and continue it on the back with my address stamps on it and my cell phone number. Officer, I just want you to know that you're dealing with one of the great people, one of the great philanthropists in this country. Bob is tremendously involved in youth programs, supporting all kinds of programs for the betterment of his community, and he's just an absolutely outstanding citizen. And then I put a little bigger letters. And after you've read this dribble, book the bastard. Well, you know what the punchline of this was? A year later, I'm at a national conference with a cop from San Diego, and I didn't know it, but he is the host of their annual big meeting of all law enforcement from San Diego County. Over 500 officers retired and active there, and he gets a lot of praise. He's the host every year. He's the MC. And my friend told me, do you know, toward the end of it, he pulled out of his wallet and he says, you know, when you got friends like this, you don't need enemies. And he read it to him. Thanks for having me here. It's so great to see y'all. Thank you, Peggy and Mike, for inviting me. It's been a couple of tough years for me, losing a lot of family members. So I've just had to really go on a back burner. Right, my nurse? Yes. And a lot of people, not the time to mention it, but all within a very short time frame. Lost my wife, Noreen, after 48 years. 2 months later in San Diego, my daughter, there with her 3 kids, called me up and said, Dad, I've been holding off sharing this with you because I know that you and we're all grieving so much for Noreen, but please come and see me. I've got just 2 months left. And she had a rare brain cancer and passed away, and was down in San Diego a lot, so it's been a pretty tough year. And would you believe it, my only sibling, 4 months later, Jimmy in Tri-Cities, lived in Tri-Cities, my older brother, a hero. A person couldn't design a better brother. And I used to get him to the pageant. He lived in Portland, and I'd get him to Vancouver every year and spruce him up. Come to the pageant there, and he and his wife just absolutely loved it. But all of the people involved in the program. He was my older brother, and we're from Shelton, if anybody knows where that is. And Our dad came from the old country and died when we were very young. Mother didn't drive, had to go to work in a laundry, and my brother was 6 years older than me. So he really raised me, and that's the legacy and the power of the relationship between my brother and myself. And when my dad was very ill on the couch the last couple of years, my brother was 14, I was about 8. He hands the car keys to him and says, "Jimmy, you're going to have to drive, Mom, and do the shopping." And I remember standing in the room, and my brother's eyes get big. "But Dad, I don't have a license." We have no choice. Nobody's going to worry about it. And so he hands him the keys, and for the night, you go out and start the car. It was an old Chevy, gear shift, right? I heard that so much. And then finally, about the third day, I says, "Oh, he's right, just right in front of the house." So, when do you know it? He calls me and says, "We're going to go shopping. Mom gave us a list." And little town of Shelton, we're driving along, and even as young as I was, I recognized this is a stop sign. And I had heard about California stops. But he comes close and then went through. You'll get a kick out of this. A block or two away, we get pulled over. And oh my gosh, you didn't push a button to lower the windows in those days. You had to go like this. My brother was just absolutely petrified. I wanted to bail out and run. And "Oh, Jimmy, oh, Jimmy." He said, oh. I mean, the sounds for us young kids was just terrible. The officer comes up and he says, "I just want to talk to you. Are you young Skagen?" He says, "Yes, sir. What's your name?" "Jimmy." "Jimmy, sir. Well, I want to know how your dad's doing." And it says, "Oh my gosh, he's not doing very well, sir." "Well, I know. And pass on my best to him, will you? He's so well known and respected in our town." And we're hoping. "What's your name over there?" I said, "Roy." "Roy, sir. You're the younger brother?" "Yeah." "Well, take care, kid. You come from a good family. So, okay, take care." Of course, he didn't ask him for his driver's license. He knew he didn't have one. So he turns and starts to walk away. Make a full stop. Thanks for having me, everybody.